Nobody's done the dirty dance. I don't know what the cool thing is. What do you call sex these days? What's
no. Better yet, what do we call it in like the 90s? Right?
I think smash.
Oh! You know what's the most 90s one?
What's that?
Knocking boots.
I'm glad he got you guys for friends.
Yeah, I like that. Back it. Hey, yeah. Back it. Hey, yeah. Man.
And everybody say,
It feels good watching the trailer.
Right?
That was classic.
Takes you back, man. So yeah, of course, that was the trailer for The Wood, 1999 movie, which I didn't even know fucking MTV produced. I didn't know that was an MTV production. But
yeah, I was kind of surprised when I forgot about that when as like you're introing into the trailer there. Mm-hmm. What the fuck was MTV doing working on this film?
Yeah,
granted, they probably just bought the film and they were just like the distributors of it. But still, I would have thought this was like a BET film.
Yeah, BET was around in 99, right?
Yeah.
I guess they were just kind of starting out. I want to say it was mid 90s for BET, right? Is that right? I can't remember.
I think this was like early BET, but like this is when like, I think MTV Raps was like dying off, and then you were moving towards like, early 90s. Remember like Carson Daly, and they had like his show and all that stuff, and MTV was playing like more hip hop music and whatnot in the early 90s.
Yeah,
so that kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, but we have no fucking time to waste whatsoever. We are going to be talking about this particular aspect of The Wood, right? We might talk about a little bit how we feel about The Wood overall, maybe towards the end of this conversation. But really, this is a debate to discuss: is a sex bet moral? Interesting question. Let's lay down some groundwork here, right? Just some ground rules, okay? First, we're defining morality as descriptively to refer to certain codes of conduct and put forward by a society or a group, such as a religion, or accepted by an individual for his or her own behavior. There's also additional definition of normatively to refer to the code of conduct that, given specified conditions, would be put forward by all rational people. Okay, all of that to the side. Another ground rule is that we are accepting in this that morality is subjective, right? Are we good on that clause? That really morality can be determined by like anybody, right? Like you might have a certain set of morals. I might have a certain set of morals. They might not overlap in every area. But am I correct about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for some people, morality could be like a geographic thing, right? It could be like a regional thing. It could be rooted or based in religion or politics, gender. So there's so many nuances to like what morality really is. Like it's something that's like, for the most part, hard to define. The only thing that I feel like could be viewed across all cultures is like just be kind, be thoughtful, don't kick your dog.
But even
like that.
Even that though,
unless you're in fucking certain countries where they eat dogs, then
all right,
guess you might kick them.
But even that though, right? Like even that's subjective, right? Being nice, like what does that even mean? Like that's a completely subjective thing. Like somebody's definition of nice is okay. So we're laying all that groundwork, right? Without further ado, let's just jump into the shit. This whole concept of, is a sex bet moral, right? You gather a group of your friends and you're like, hey, we're all we're all virgins here. Nobody's done the dirty dance. I don't know what the cool thing is. What do you call sex these days? What's
no. Better yet, what do we call it in like the 90s? Right? You do the deed. Do the thing.
Banging, I think, might be an appropriate term. Yeah.
In high school, I know we used to say like, did you get your dick wet? The Dick Wet was one. Did you Smash? That's a classic. That's
okay.
That's always a good one.
That's more of 2000s. Those are all more of 2000s.
Smash, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, those are the only ones that come to mind. There's always Hit. Hit is like
it's
a transcends generation.
That's a universal one. Yeah. Hits can be used across.
Did you Crush?
Yeah, Crush. Let me see. Crush. Not. I think Smash.
Oh! You know what's the most '90s one?
What's that?
Knocking Boots. Do you remember that?
There are many songs to that descriptor. Yes.
That's the most '90s one. Yeah. Had to dig deep in the archives for that one.
Yeah. Okay. So, you got a group of your friends. You're all talking about, the fact that you haven't knocked the boots yet. And one of your genius friends has a bright idea. Hey, why don't we put some money on the line? Whoever is the first person to knock them boots, they're going to win this pot of here money, that we're all going to put into. Now, where are they getting this money? I don't know if they're getting allowance. I don't know if they have a side job. I don't know if they're working after school. I don't know what the fuck they're doing. Okay. But they've got this money. They put it into a pot, and the first person to have the sex out of the group gets the money in the pot. Now, we're going to be speaking to the morality of this, right? Is it moral to do so? Would you like to go first, or would you want me to go first, or should we do this football coin toss style to determine who should go first? What do you want?
What? Let's flip the coin. I call tails. It lands on tails. I'll go first.
You got the coin?
No. You didn't hear it. Listen, I already flipped the coin. I called tails. It landed on tails. I'm going first.
Fair enough. Okay.
So
do your debo.
I think now just a disclaimer for anyone watching who is sensitive about us talking about the movie Woods, because it is a classic film. It is nostalgic to many of us. We're not attacking this movie. We're just highlighting a idea or premise in the film. We could have easily pivoted to like American Pie. We could have pivoted to Superbad or any other teen movie, or not another teen movie, whatever. We decided to go with the Wood here. So the question is a sex bet, and is the sex bet in the film The Wood moral or immoral, or is it a gray area? My first position on this is, whether it is like immoral or destructive in any way. And for me, I can't see, a sex bet between a group of friends, whether it's a male group of friends or a female group of friends, as destructive in any way or immoral in any way, unless it is regarding like taking advantage of someone, right? If it's just, hey, who's going to lose their virginity first, right? If that is the bet, not necessarily specific to like, who's going to lose their virginity first to this person, or who's going to take that person's virginity first. Like, let's say a group of guys are having a bet about like who's going to take a girl's virginity, or, a group of women are having a bet about which one of them is going to take a guy's virginity, right? That involves someone who's being targeted, and targeting someone might be immoral. But just a general bet, if you're a high school junior, high school senior, like, hey guys, we'll put money in a pot on a weekly basis until someone loses their virginity. Whoever loses it first wins the money. I don't see that as immoral. I don't see that as destructive. So, I'm on the side of this where I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's kind of like a coming of age thing. It's a learning phase that you go through in your teens if you're a man or a woman.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Fair enough. So I'm glad that you talked a little bit about age, right? Because that's going to be my first sort of argument here of why actually it is immoral, right? Because as we know, sex as minors is a no-no, both just culturally as well as legally. So in all of these movies, or not, maybe not all. Well, I guess all the movies that we're talking about, right? American Pie, Superbad, and that was less of like a sex bet, more so, hey, we're just going to set up a party so we can fuck other people. But obviously between American Pie and The Wood, right? That they're all underage, right? And so if we're looking at it from that standpoint, it is immoral, because it goes against, and again, it's what the culture believes. It's what, a certain what the laws may dictate, right? And culturally, it's frowned upon for teens and and those who are underage, no matter what that age is, whether we're talking about, if we're counting underage as like 17, or some places it's 16, in terms of sex with a minor being an illegal act. In either case, these kids are clearly underage. And what are they, sophomores, I think, in high school or something like that, specifically here in the Wood. Long story short, they're all fucking underage. So they have no fucking business having sex, let alone fucking making a sex pact, sex bet about who's going to have sex first, And then, and one of the things I'll kind of point to within the actual movie itself is the scenes, some of which we're seeing actually right now on the screen, which is, as they go through this montage of the dudes trying to have sex, they're basically trying to coax, all these girls into having sex with them. And the girls are like, man, fuck all that shit. I'm not trying to do all that. That sounds wild to me. So clearly they're underage, they're wildly inexperienced, and they have no business anywhere around having sex. I defer to you. The floor is yours, my friend.
So I think in your commentary just there, you alluded to the fact that like there are laws around it, right? The United States government or state bodies of government or local legislation has created laws to tell people when they can have sex, with who they can have sex, and how they can have sex, right? And it is because, and you say it's a cultural thing. It is because, unfortunately, our culture views a very common thing that like a lot of people do all the time, every day, as taboo unless you could profit from it, right? Like there's a porn industry and it is like the number one thing on the internet, and you could profit from that. But like if you do it in your own home with consent, it's not okay if you're like 16, which is really weird to me.
Why is that weird?
Because like, at the age of 60, if guy and girl who are dating in a relationship, friends or whatever, if they both consent to having sex, exploring that, right? Exploring their sexuality.
Should there not be a limit to like the age? So like what if somebody's like 12, right? Like,
so what I do think is there definitely should be an age limit. I think 16 for me.
So now we're in a negotiation about the age, right? So we've already established that there should be a limit, but we're just discussing what age is appropriate.
So I think, and this is the gray area about it, right? It's, is there someone at the age of 14? Is someone able to make that decision for themselves? Sure. Now, should they be making that decision with someone who is relatively of the same age? I do believe so. So I think where, kind of like laws and rules to this should come in is like if there's a significant difference in age, right? Or if the person is below a certain age to where they might be being manipulated or taken advantage of in some way.
That's what I'm asking.
There's so much gray area. Me personally, I would say like minimum age 15, 16. Like that's where I would say minimum age.
So you agree with what I was saying then?
So I agree with what you were saying, except for like some of the like more nuanced details of it, like age difference, the person is like, if one person is 15 and the other person is 16, but they're both consenting, right? And like, let's say the minimum age is 16, like, is that wrong?
But didn't you just say that the age of 15 or 16 is where we should have a limit in terms of when people?
Sure. But like, let's say one kid, kid A is 16 and kid B is 15, but kid B turns 16 in 3 months, right? Like, is it we wait 3 months for it to be illegal, or is that just like gray area and like, that it's hard to define?
Right. But I guess what I'm like, the basis of what I was saying though, is that it's immoral based on the fact that whether you're talking about the laws or culturally acceptance, there is a limit to the age. And in The Wood, I want to say they were in middle school, but I might not be right about that.
No, they weren't in middle school. They were in high school.
Weren't they but they went to I guess junior, was it just junior year that they jumped to? Because there was like a time.
They were in like junior. Yeah, they were in junior high, right? And so I think they were like juniors or sophomores in high school.
Okay. Yeah, either way, they were around that age of like 14.
They were 15, around like 15, 16. Yeah. Okay. So, but what I want to do is jump into my second point here, right? So I think we tend to look at this in like a gender specific fashion, right? Where, the people generally making like bets about, having sex or taking virginity, it always is positioned as like it's just a male thing. It's like something men do, right? Guys are betting who could, sleep with that girl first, or who could take that girl's virginity, or who's going to lose their virginity first. But I would argue that it's something that's not gender specific, right? That like, maybe a group of girls maybe does the same thing. Like which one of them is going to lose their virginity on spring break or senior week or something like that, right? And there's a certain taboo around the topic culturally that I think it's nonsense, really, right? Because again, the same people who are saying it's wrong are the same people who are doing it in high school. And that happens generation after generation after generation. It would be immoral if this was something that only like the boys were able to do, if it were reserved for men, or if it were reserved for women. But because this is not like a gender specific thing, it's just a taboo thing in our culture. I see no reason for this to be like branded or labeled as an immoral thing for high school kids exploring their sexuality to be labeled as.
Interesting. Quick follow-up question. What does gender, as you were explaining, I wasn't quite clear what gender has to do with the morality of it. How are the two connected?
So, I'll just position it like this, right? So I think if we're looking at morality, right, in terms of like gender specific, right? I think if you're saying like,
why are we looking at it as gender, like what's connecting the two? Why does morality have anything to do with the gender? Like what is the
it's like, it's who's doing it, right? It's like if one group of people is doing it, it's immoral. If another group of people are doing it, it could be viewed as something morally or ethical, right?
This is the last time. I promise this is the last time I'll ask. But like, what is who's saying that? Like what is, we're talking about The Wood. Like we're saying, is it moral or not? But what is, like, who's postulating that, like, it's because the boys are doing it, it's immoral. But if girls were to do it, then it would be, not immoral.
What I'm saying is like the stance in this movie, right? It's a group of guys making a sex bet, which could be viewed as immoral, right? Sure. Now, if it were like, let's say, juxtaposition in this movie and it were a group of girls, would we be having that same conversation about morality, or would we be talking about the teenage sexual journey, right?
Which is it immoral? I
don't think we would be asking that same question. I honestly don't think we would if this movie were from like the female perspective and
okay. So like maybe we should have done this on the movie Blockers then, right? The Blockers was the movie with like I think like John Cena and I forget who the fuck else was in it, but that was basically like a pact, like I think it was a girls who made like a pact of like, hey, on prom night we're gonna get fucked or whatever the case is. So we could have easily have done this on Blockers and asked literally the same exact question and not have blinked an eye at it, which is it?
Yeah, see, but like, I mean, we never even considered that. Why? Because like,
first of all, I've never watched Blockers, so that's one of the first reasons.
I've never watched it either. But like when we were talking about this subject, right? What were all of the movies that we brought up? We brought up The Wood. We brought up American Pie. We brought up Superbad, which are all movies in which like a group of boys
but to be fair,
are making bets or pacts about
I'm sorry to
virginity.
Interrupt you, but like there just weren't that many of those, or really any movies that I can think of from like a woman's. Blockers honestly is the only movie that I know that I can remember from a girl's point of view or from a woman's point of view.
And I mean, and again, why is that, right? I think it's because
a completely different question though.
Yeah, well, I think it's because it's easier to make a movie about men doing it, right? Like men betting on sexuality and sex. And it's like something like men would do, right? It's an immoral thing that men would do. But like the other side of it, like, again, if juxtaposition, if this were a group of women, would we even be having the conversation about morality? And I don't think we would, because of the way society views male sexuality and female sexuality. So, the reason I bring up gender is because, whether it's like a group of men or a group of women, I don't think it's immoral for either gender to, in their teenage years, to have this type of view or stance on their sexuality, and maybe like make a bet between friends.
Right. Still not sure I fully understand exactly where you were coming from with that, but fair enough.
Because you're not listening with your ears, Tunde.
Sure.
You got to listen with your ears.
Yeah, I mean, what else would I really listen with? But okay, fair enough. So putting all that aside, my second point for why it actually is immoral is it actually has to do with what the overall goal is, right? If the overall goal is, and in the Wood, it was to have sex with anybody, right? Which honestly, I kind of don't really think that's immoral. If your goal is, it doesn't really matter who you have sex with, right? But although I guess maybe I'll get to that later, but if your actual goal is to have sex with somebody who is somebody who you actually want to like date and actually like have feelings for, and you're essentially placing a wager on that prospect that you'll have sex with this person that you actually care about, then I would say it actually is immoral, because then what comes into it is the idea of deceit, right? That, we tend to judge things in terms of morality. Like, so for instance, being truthful, like you talked a little bit at the beginning of like, there's some like universal things, which I kind of contest, but for argument's sake, let's say that there are some universal things that we consider as moral, right? Being truthful, I would argue, is one of those things, right? And would you agree or disagree with that?
I'd agree with that.
Okay. So if being truthful is a moral trait, right? And you're doing this sex bet and you're not telling the person who you're trying to have sex with, who you supposedly care about, that the real reason, or one of the main reasons why you're trying to have sex with them is because of this sex bet, then I would consider that an immoral act, because you're being deceitful in this act, especially if your goal is to date the person, or if you're saying you care about the person, which is why in every fucking movie that you've seen, whether it's The Wood or American Pie, it tends to be the case where when the person actually does have feelings for the other person, then they don't even tell people about the bet, or they don't tell the people involved with the bet about the fact that they had sex with the person, right? So you can point to there was the two people who were in the band, who were in the singing group in American Pie. They had sex, and I guess he just didn't tell the dudes about that, because he was just like, no, I care about her, and was it, I can't remember if Jason Biggs' character, if he told them, but like, long story short, mostly all of them were just like, didn't fucking say anything, because they cared about the people that they wound up having sex with, so I would contest here in The Wood, it actually is an immoral act, because if it's from the standpoint of that you actually care about the person you're trying to have sex with, that's the caveat that I would throw in there.
So that caveat, what is that, right? That is like gray area. So what I heard is that like the bet itself may or may not be immoral. It is the lying to the person that you care about, that you would be having sex with. But that has to do with the bet, right? That you can't be a part of the bet if you're not like trying to have sex with people, right? So the caveat has to do with the actual bet itself. So you're not. It's not as if you say we're trying to have sex with somebody in like a vacuum of just like, oh, like we're just going to say that and then we're not actually going to do that. But you actually have to have another human being that you're trying to have sex with. So it's a caveat in the sense of
what is your actual goal? Is your actual goal just to have sex with anybody? Which I might argue that that's actually not necessarily immoral then, for like in terms of a sex bet, because at the end of the day, you don't really give a shit about the person you're trying to have sex with. So
yeah. So like in the movie, like what if one of the guys was like, hey, like I made this bet. There's this pot.
Two of them said that. Yeah.
But they didn't but the girls didn't go along with it, right?
Not the ones that, eventually they did. So eventually one of them did win the bet. But some of the, in the montages, no. So most of the girls that they were trying to have sex with didn't.
Yeah. So again, the morality there is based off of like, whether or not you're disclosing this bet with the other person. It's okay if you disclose it and the other person agrees to it to win the bet. It's not okay, or it's not moral if the other person is unaware of it. Right. So, the reason why I would argue it is the second act. It is are you being honest or dishonest with that person the other person who's involved? But the first act, the bet itself, there's no, that is not immoral. It's the second act that may or may not be.
Well, I mean, they're forever intertwined, right? Like you're not.
No, I would say they're two very distinct parts of it. There's the first act, the bet, and then there's the second act, which is like the action of actually doing it.
You're not going to have the first act without eventually having the second act, right? Like that's the whole.
You could. Yeah, you could. You could have the first act, and then you don't have the second act, and what is that? Then you lose the bet if the second act doesn't take place.
No, not necessarily if it doesn't take place, but because the actual. You win the bet if you have sex with the person, right? But that doesn't prevent you from trying to have sex with people, right? So regardless of if you win the bet or not, you're still actively trying to, you're still actively being deceitful, are you not?
Not really. I mean, because you'd be, whether there was a bet or not, you'd be, I mean, come on, this is high school, right? So whether there's a bet or not, you would still be trying to do that, right? Now there's just, a potential.
No, not necessarily. Not
return in your investment on the line.
Not necessarily, because you might be, the bet is acting as incentive, right? The reason why there's money involved is because, hey, whoever's the first person to do this wins the money. This is literally the stance behind all gambling, right? Which is, we're going to put this money in this thing, and if you're the person who wins the thing, then you get the money, right? That's called incentive, right? So therefore, placing the bet gives you incentive to try to go and have sex before anybody else does, right? So yes, there's going to be the second part because you're going to try to have sex with somebody in order, even if you don't really care about having sex, just to win the fucking money, right? Because especially as a teenager,
the money is the second incentive. Let's be real about that. Like there's a primary instinctual incentive.
That's fair for that's fair to say. But what I'm saying is that there's always going to be incentive to try to have sex. It's not like you're going to make the bet and be like, all right, I'm not going to do any of that shit. I'm just going to go read a book in a library. No, you're like, if you have a sex bet, you're going to go try to have sex.
Yeah. And if there was no bet, you'd still do the same thing, which is why I don't know. But
it's not but again, you don't have that added incentive to it, right? That if you might just try to go have sex just to have sex, but there's no outside of your own want to have sex, there's no actual incentive outside of just having sex. But if you add money,
that's the only incentive I need.
Okay, that's you.
Anything else is icing on the cake.
That's you. If you would like to get to your third point, please.
So my third point on this really comes down to like just that, right? The incentive, the instinctual human incentive, whether a bet exists or not. Whether, if you're a high school boy or girl, it is something that is instinctual. You have your little boyfriend, you have your little girlfriend, it's the weekend, it's summer break, it's winter break, it's senior week, whatever. It is an instinctual thing. And there's nothing immoral about that. Right. So, in their situation, like it's something that they were all trying to do anyway. Now they just added a second incentive to say, hey, whoever does it first wins a little bit of money, right? You take it, you buy some Bitcoin, a couple years later, you're a millionaire, right? I don't see anything wrong with that. Again, but I do agree with your earlier point where disclosure should be. Disclosure is what muddies the water a little bit, right? Like, do you tell the person that you're trying to sleep with about this bet, or do you conceal that information? Now, the question I would ask then is like, who does it hurt? Like, does it or does it not hurt the person if you choose not to disclose it with them, right? Like, let's say you hook up with, girl in English class and you win the bet, and then all that really happens then is, you win some money that she doesn't know about, and it doesn't hurt that person in any way. And again, the same thing goes with like if a girl hooks up with a guy and she wins money for it, and in no way does it hurt him or invalidate him. So, which goes back to my first point. This is a non-destructive thing. Nobody really gets hurt. There's no real damage done here. It is a private bet between a group of friends that ultimately doesn't hurt anyone.
What? That's the only way. That's the only appropriate way to respond to this. What? Of course it hurts people. What the fuck?
Who does it hurt?
What? Okay.
Wait, no, answer that question. Who gets hurt?
I'm trying to answer the question. Please just let me get there. First of all, in literally, what were you watching when you watched any of these movies? Were you actually like watching the movie, or were you just like, oh, they're having sex? Because inevitably, the lesson learned in every one of the stories is that the person who they're essentially trying to have sex with, either they don't tell that person and they don't claim the bet because they know that would hurt their feelings, or the person ends up fucking finding out about the bet and is pissed that, hey, why the fuck are you using me for a bet? That this, like, us having sex, and honestly, it's you're a teenager, so, and all these dudes are like virgins, right? And one might assume that maybe all the girls that they're trying to sleep with are virgins as well. The first time you have sex with somebody and you find out that maybe they did like you, but also another incentive for them was that they would win money if they had sex with you, right? And it wasn't a sex pact, but or sex bet, but she's all that, right? Wasn't that kind of a thing there where she finds out that it was a bet that he could make her prom queen or whatever the fuck it was? And then she found out and she was like, what the fuck? Like, this is some bullshit, and yeah, or 10 Things I Hate About You, right? She finds out that the dude's being paid to like date her, right? Heath Ledger's character was trying to date fucking Julia Stiles' character, right? And she was pissed, right? Because there was money involved, right? Hey, you're not doing this out of the fact that you really fucking like me. It's at least in part because you're getting money. There's an exchange of money in that case, which I would assume.
And what the big problem with all of these films is that like the people involved are not looking at the financial gain, right? If that were me, if I could go back to junior year in high school and some girl were to come to me and say, hey, Arain, I've got this bet. If we smash in the wrestling room downstairs at Wild Lake High School, if you go down the hall is to the right. And I know that. I remember that well.
Like everybody's trying to have sex in the gym.
Yeah, everybody knew the wrestling room was always open, with the nice cushy mats. Anyway, they were always sterilized too. Anyway. So if some young lady came to me in high school and she was like, hey, I got this bet going on and, I'll win $100 if we go smash in the wrestling room. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I just need, I need 25% of the revenue from this transaction. Yeah. Bam, let's go. Have you heard of Bitcoin or Tesla? Yeah. Pay me in Bitcoin.
Here's a quick response for your joke is that not everybody is a sociopath like you. So some people actually have feelings.
This is about economics.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to explain. This is
capitalism.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to explain is that some people are less concerned with the socioeconomic impacts of the said bet and more.
Well, those people deserve to be taken advantage of. I'm sorry. This is America. Okay. I'm just playing by the American rules.
All right. Well, yeah, you are an American, I guess. So, this explains.
No, listen, I'm Jamaican, but I'm playing by American rules. It's the country we live in.
You're a citizen.
Rob, cheat, and
steal. You're a citizen of the United States of America. So,
no, listen. To all of our viewers and listeners, rob, cheat, steal, and lie. That's the American way. Those are the founding principles of this great country.
So you see, while my opponent here decides to, devolve the conversation into jokes, into, hilarious, I am going to stay on message here. Okay, it is immoral Honestly, because of what you just said, which is essentially, hey, if you don't want to make money with me, then fuck you, right? Which is essentially the summary of what you just said. Which again, that would point to an immoral base for this sex pact. But I will get to my final point here, which is the idea of gambling itself. Now, one might argue that gambling itself isn't immoral. Some others actually would argue that it absolutely is immoral, right? Because of what gambling essentially does to people, right? Eventually speaking, sometimes, not all the time, I'll fully admit, but sometimes it leads to addiction, right? Some people get addicted to gambling and suddenly they fucking gamble their fucking life savings away. Or maybe it's not even their life savings, but maybe they gamble way more than they fucking should. And it leads to problems within their relationship, problems within their life, right? Depending on what you're more, and this kind of goes back to the groundwork that we laid at the beginning, which is morals are subjective, right? To the individual. So I would say that in this movie, The Wood, right? Let's get back to the movie. In this movie, The Wood, you have Mike's, I guess Omar App's character as he gets older, but I forget the name of the person who acted as him, as young Mike. But you have Mike, who he's a nice Southern boy from North Carolina. I would say that according to his own morals, which he has a mom who's a God-fearing woman. I don't know that, but she seemed like she was the Sunday service type of person. God-fearing woman who taught him certain values and things like that in life. By his own moral basis, this would be an immoral act. With that, I would rest my case. But long story short, we will leave it up to you, the audience, to decide whether the sex bet in The Wood was an immoral or moral act. Let us know in the comment section below what you guys think. Let us know what your stance is.
And let us know whose side you're on too. Are you on my side? Do you, like me, prefer women who are about finances and financial gain, who live in a capitalistic economy and acknowledge that, who are trying to buy stocks? We're trying to get some Bitcoin. We're trying to get some GameStop shares. Or are you on Tunde's side where, we got to be sensitive to everybody. We got to disclosure.
Yeah, I'll remind everybody, nothing
consent
he just said means.
I'm kidding.
Nothing that he just said had anything to do with what the actual argument was. It's all just fluff and fucking pyrotechnics to make you look over there, right? I
like pyrotechnics.
What the actual argument was, okay? So I'll remind all of you of that. For if you do decide to pick sides, just remember that fact. He was giving you, it's just like an American would give you a whole bunch of nonsense with no actual fact or base in reality in it. Just things to distract you, okay? All right, moving the fuck on. I thought that was a very healthy and spirited conversation. I'd enjoyed. I really much enjoyed besting you in that conversation. But nonetheless, we have to move on here to our first.